Hello everyone, welcome to this issue of SWIPE SciComm. Today I had the great privilege of being interviewing Lyndal Byford. Lyndal works at the intersection between science and traditional media. She is the Director of News and Partnership at the Australian Science Media Centre. She has a long list of achievements, but the most recent one is that she was crowned the unsung hero of science communication here down under in Australia. So welcome, Linda. It's great to have you. How are you?
Thanks, Tullio. It's brilliant to be here. I'm great.
Excellent. The reason why I wanted you as a guest here for SWIPE SciComm is because I was very captivated by your presentation at the Australian Science Communicators Conference in Canberra earlier this year. And in that talk, you described lots of things I was not aware of about online harassment and how scientists can be targets of really nasty and dangerous, to some degree, online harassment. And you opened the talk with a stunning statistic that threw me off. You mentioned that 1 in 5 scientists got harassed during the pandemic in some way. How's that possible? I thought it will happen only to a minority of the most exposed scientists, but how is it possible that 20% get some form of harassment?
Well, we were specifically looking at scientists who spoke to the media during COVID. So, and that I think is one of the key points around this harassment is yes, the more scientists are engaging with the public through the mainstream media or on social media, the higher their chances are of being harassed and abused online. So what we found is that 1 in 5 Australian scientists who had spoken to the media about COVID got death threats or threats of physical or sexual violence. So this wasn't just any form of harassment. This was 1 in 5 had that most severe form of harassment as well. So it was actually about half, or about 60%, who said that they got some form of harassment in total. So for scientists that speak to the media, it is something that a lot have had to deal with.
Wow, that's shocking. And we don't want to terrify researchers watching today. We want to reinforce that it's very important that they put themselves out there and they do interact with the media and talk about science. Because if they don't do it, well, then who's going to do it? And society needs scientists and needs them in the public conversation. So it's a very important role that scientists play. So what I would like to achieve with today's interview is to give some tips and tools to researchers on how to be a bit more street smart when it comes to online harassment, so that if it happens, they have a plan and they're not completely caught by surprise. So could you describe typically what will happen? Like what does this online harassment look like? How do you recognize it?
So the most common thing that we found in our survey was that people were experiencing, reputational damage, or I guess you could probably call it really critical feedback of their work and their reputation that was kind of moving into that abusive phase. So most people weren't necessarily being threatened, but it was a lot of this undermining of their credibility. So kind of attacks on their credibility as experts was the most common thing that people achieved. And quite often that can result in what we call a pile-on. So you might appear in the media, there might be something in that story that then triggers abuse through social media or emails. And because you've appeared in the media, you can get, a lot of that in a really short period of time, where everybody kind of seems to pile on you, usually in the 3 days following that social media appearance. So that's one of the common things that we see among scientists, but it can be really, really varied. And it can be at that extreme end where people are getting death threats or threats of violence. It can be, spurious kind of reports to their institutions about them, having done some sort of misconduct in their research. It can be FOI requests that never seem to stop. There's a huge range, and it can go all the way through to doxing, which is the sharing of people's personal and private information online, like your home address. And we even saw people having things, abusive material posted to them at their home address. So it can be really varied, but most of the time, it's this kind of nastiness that is sometimes inherent in social media, where people can be anonymous and abusive in that space.
Yeah, and the typical keyboard warriors, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we also asked people about which platforms they get the most abuse on, and Twitter, or X as it's now known, was definitely up the top. And I think anyone that's been on that platform would attest to the fact that, it's really easy for people to kind of fire off these, abusive messages. And there's also a lot of bots on that system that can multiply and seem like an attack is much greater than it is. So that's one of the first things I would say, is that often it can feel like there's hundreds and thousands of people pouring on in one of these pile-on attacks on social media, but a large proportion of them are probably not going to be real people. And we do see these bots and automated social media accounts that just amplify any posts that are getting that kind of engagement. So, the minute you start getting abused, bots can pick up on that and really, really amplify that level of abuse that you're getting. So pause and have a look and think, this may not be coming from real people, and who is it actually coming from?
Exactly. Who is it coming from? Like, as we were talking, I relived my own quite moderate experience of being, a canceling attempt on social media, which funnily enough happened when I launched this very same magazine where you're now being interviewed. And so when I was preparing the launch, I looked around and I realized that in the field of science communications, there are journals, there are blogs, there are YouTube channels, and more, but I couldn't find any magazine as such. So when I launched SWIPE SciComm, I said, well, this is the world's first magazine. And by magazine, I mean something with a front cover, a back cover, organized in issues, which are the typical characteristics of a magazine. Well, I did not expect it, but somebody out there didn't like me to say that at all. And this person felt that their thing came first, even though it wasn't a magazine. It was more like a website or blog with a newsletter attached to it. So I experienced a whole week of attacks on both Twitter and LinkedIn from this person and their friends, which wasn't fun. I was very stressed for that whole week, and then luckily it stopped, and that was that. And of course, it didn't go as far as death threats or anything like it. But yeah, even that, just by saying, pointing out that, I'm wrong and how could I say such a thing and I was second guessing myself. But then I realized, no, I'm right. And so I went to the dictionary and said, well, this is the definition of a magazine. This is what I'm saying. Go away.
Yeah. And look, I think there's a couple of really key things in that are consistent across the discussions we've had with experts. The first one is that this stuff has a real impact on people. It can absolutely affect your well-being. It can cause huge amounts of stress, and that's a natural reaction to this kind of attack and abuse that people are getting online. So I guess one thing, people, give yourself permission. It's okay to have those feelings and emotions around this. That's perfectly normal way to respond. And actually, sometimes expressing those feelings, but maybe expressing them offline and taking a pause before you react on social media can be an important way to separate what's happening in that online space to what's happening in the real world. So doing something that does look after your well-being, taking, even if it's just 5 minutes to go and have a coffee with a friend or walk around the block, listen to your favorite thrash metal song, whatever it happens to be, that can kind of break you out of that fight or flight kind of immediate reactive space, so that you can kind of pause. And if you then still feel the need to kind of respond, you're doing it from a kind of more measured, thoughtful way rather than that immediate knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, completely relate. And I remember it got to the Friday night, and I was about to go out and meet some friends, and my mind was still racing because I just received this last angry tweet from somebody, and I was compelled to respond and to make my point. But what was happening is that I was just ruining my night out with my friends. So yeah, it's not easy to compartmentalize, but yeah, you pointed out some good techniques. Go for a walk.
And
Remember
sometimes
that.
it can be useful to write the angry tweet response, but just don't send it. Write it, get it out, write it in an email, and then delete the email. And that way you have, got those feelings and emotions out, but you haven't actually escalated that problem.
Yeah, good one. Now it reminds me of what one of my team members said the other day. She's a project manager, and sometimes clients can be a bit difficult. And the first response would be to write a pretty severe and direct email, which of course is not the right thing to do with clients. So what she does is that she writes the email she would like to write and then puts it in ChatGPT and asks, ChatGPT, can you make this nice, please? Can you make this polite?
That's
And
great.
apparently it's a very good use case for it. It does a good job, apparently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing is, do you need to respond? Like, think about, we know that people who troll on social media, part of the reason that they do it is the reward they get from seeing the disruption that it causes. So the more reactive and inflamed and, annoyed you are by their tweet or by their abuse of you, the greater the reward for them. So, scientists people online have always been told, don't feed the trolls, don't feed the trolls. And actually, while that can't be the only advice, in some situations, just not responding is probably the best way to sort of stop that particular piece of abuse from escalating further.
Yeah, absolutely. So don't feed the troll. Good piece of advice. What other tips do you have for researchers to be a bit more street smart? Also, how can they make the digital presence a bit more safe, be less exposed to potential attacks so that they don't end up being doxxed or things like that?
So the first thing to do is to do a bit of a privacy checkup on your social media accounts. So that's making sure that your personal and professional social media accounts are quite separate. So that could even include using like a nickname on your personal Facebook account so that, people can't easily discover those personal accounts so that you can keep them separate. And it's also removing personal phone numbers and addresses and things like that from professional social media accounts, making sure that you have your privacy settings set to the level that you want them to. The other thing people should do is Google themselves online. There's lots of companies these days who essentially make money from scraping data off websites, your contact data off websites, and selling them on. So I know when I Googled myself, I found my mobile number, my email address, everything being sold on these websites. And you can actually then contact them and say, please take my data off your website. And also things like online CVs can often have home phone numbers and home addresses, so making sure you don't have any of those sorts of things. If you've got a personal website, you may then have your personal information, where that website is registered, so you need to look at those sorts of things. And even like location settings on your social media accounts, making sure that you're not sharing your location regularly so that people always know where you are. But and even things like if you're posting, a photo of yourself in front of your house when you sold it, with the sold sign, then somebody can easily jump on the real estate websites and look up where that is. So just being a bit savvy about how you share things like your location. And then the one we should all do, which we probably don't do as much as we should, is having things like two-factor authentication and password managers, so we're not reusing all the same email addresses and accounts.
Yeah, that should be the ABC, but things are taking a very interesting turn now with AI. And I've just come across a few weeks ago a facial recognition service available to anybody. So I uploaded a picture of me, and you basically have access to a facial recognition algorithm that scans all of the internet and looks for matches, which is a bit terrifying. And if you want your pictures removed from that website, you can. You just need to get in touch with them. But by default, it's all there, which is not great. I think this should be regulated because it's, this is detective level kind of technology, which should not be in the hands of everyone, in my opinion. So yeah, also that one is already available, and to anybody, just a website. You go there, put a picture of somebody, and it will find matches anywhere on the internet. And I came across some pictures of myself I had no idea, no memory of, from like 20 years ago. It was quite a revelation, really, that this technology is now out there. And when it comes to online harassment, it just could make it worse. Okay, you've shared some great tips. When is it the point to report this, and who should the researcher report harassment?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because there is this, I guess, idea that science is often about conflict. We challenge each other's research in science, and conflict is a kind of natural part of the scientific process. But if it is impacting your well-being, if it is threatening or menacing or, unrelenting, things like that, and it's starting to affect your feelings of safety, then it's definitely something that you want to record and report. So the first important thing to do is collect the evidence. So taking screenshots, recording URLs, saving emails, and potentially putting all this stuff in a folder that is a little bit buried on your computer, so you don't have to necessarily look at it every day, but that you've got that record, so that if things do start to escalate beyond just someone sending you an abusive message online, then you've got that record of kind of ongoing abuse and harassment. There's a couple of ways you can report it. The first step is usually to report it to the platform, so the social media company, and that comes with varying levels of success, I would say. They're not always great at taking this stuff down straight away, and you get a real difference depending on the platforms and, the time of day and who knows what else. So, but they're always the first point of call. If they don't take it down within 48 hours, you can also report it to the E-Safety Commissioner's Office. So in Australia, we have the Office of E-Safety, and they have a role in essentially being that a middleman almost between helping the public kind of get offensive and abusive online material taken down off the internet. So they have ongoing relationships with these platforms, and they can work on your behalf to really force that media platform to take it down. You can also report it to the media outlet, particularly if it does follow an appearance in the media, because it's really important for those journalists to know that you've experienced this, and they can turn off comments on stories and things like that to help protect you as well. The other person that I would suggest you speak to is somebody at your work. So it could be your line manager, the media team in your organization. They can help bring in your IT department or the security department, and just letting those people know that you are experiencing this and going through it is really important. We know about 40% of people don't report it to anybody when they get this kind of harassment, and really that all that does is make people think this isn't as much of a big problem as it is, and this kind of suffering in silence, and then you don't know which other colleagues have gone through it. So we really need that reporting to take place, so that research organizations can be aware of the level of abuse that is going on.
Very good advice. And this e-safety commission was completely unknown and new to me, and I think everyone in the audience. So write that one down, because it could be a very, very good resource. In your talk at the conference, you also mentioned something that I did not expect, which is sometimes the worst harassments come from other scientists. How's that possible? How could scientists be the worst? I thought they would be nasty only when reviewing papers.
I think because because, if you are getting harassed by a member of the public, it's kind of much easier for people to just dismiss it as an online troll and kind of water off a duck's back, and it doesn't tend to have that same impact. Whereas when this is coming from a trusted peer or a colleague, it really can add to those feelings of self-doubt, I think. Maybe I have got things wrong. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. It really can make people sort of undermine their own confidence. And it has a much, much greater impact. And we know that a lot of the abuse that experts received, had far more impact on them when it came from a politician, another scientist, someone working in, high levels of public health. Those kind of leaders of the community, to be attacked by them can have a huge impact on people. So, and I think when it comes to scientists, as I said, this conflict is kind of part of science. But scientists aren't taught how to disagree well. It's not part of the training. How do you disagree well so that it doesn't become, abusive or harassing?
Exactly. Let's be nice to each other. I mean, the life of a researcher is hard enough. We should be nice to each other.
Absolutely.
I know we're not. I had my fair share of drama during my PhD, with my paper getting rejection after rejection, and then I realized why. It was because this person out there didn't like me to publish such a novel idea in the field that he felt was his own, and so he tried to scoop my study and publish it before me, which was ridiculous and caused me so much stress that really was not necessary. So yeah, scientists, let's be nice to each other. Even when you write those reviewer comments, let's be nice to each other. I think we only can gain from that. All right.
Absolutely. And to use a sporting metaphor, play the ball and not the man. So, focus on critiquing the paper or the science and not the person that has done that research.
Exactly. Because we know, how important reputation is for a researcher or any professional, really. So attacking that reputation is really a low hit. So let's not do that. Okay, so can be researchers, of course, can also be random people out there on the internet. And I know you're working on a package of resources that will go well beyond what we discussed here today. So where can researchers find them? How can they access them? Are they available yet? Tell us, Linda.
So we have a website called sciencemediasavvy.org. And that is an online place where scientists can go to get tips around working with the media, and it's sort of an online media training portal. So at the end of this month, we're going to be adding a package of resources to that website around harassment. So it'll be some advice on how to protect yourself in advance of doing media engagement, some of the tips we talked about today, but others. And then also some advice on what to do if you find yourself the victim of harassment online. And we've also got interviews with scientists who've kind of been through the ringer and how they've come out the other end and what they've learned through that process. And we're also including some of this advice in the media training that we do for universities and research organizations. We've even run a couple of workshops specifically with experts who have had extreme ongoing harassment, to try and give them the safe space, I guess, to talk about their experiences and to learn from each other.
This is great. I think this is a very needed resource, and I think there's almost nothing out there similar to help researchers deal with these difficult situations. By the way, I'll also say that I used Science Media Savvy during my PhD days when I had to interact with the media and journalists in general, and I found it very useful even back then. So I'm sure that now it's been improved and got even better, and it was 100% free. So great resource, available for free for researchers. So absolutely make use of it. and also make use of the Science Media Center in general. So Linda, can you describe for the audience that might not know what the Science Media Center is, and does it exist only in Australia or also in other countries?
Yeah, so the Science Media Center is really there to try and help the mainstream media report science better. So we provide that bridge between the scientific world and the media world, and we work on both sides of that. So we help scientists to engage with the media, particularly around breaking news and big, messy, controversial science stories that are going to find themselves splashed on the front page. We also work with journalists to help them make sure they're reporting the best quality peer-reviewed science, directing them to, peer-reviewed science rather than other science that might be out there, and helping them look for some of the tips and traps that are there when you're covering science stories. So we do a lot of injecting experts into the daily news cycle so that the public at large is really hearing the evidence base of any of these news stories.
Great. And if you're a researcher that want to get to interact with the media, which is something I do recommend. I think it's our duty as researchers. There is this database that the Science Media Center manages, where essentially it makes it easy for journalists to find an expert on whatever topic that they need an expert in. So that helped me get some interactions with the media, which was something that I was looking forward to share my evidence-based message.
That's great. So that website is scimex.org/expert. So that's the page you can sign up and register, particularly if you're in Australia and New Zealand, because that's and the Pacific. That's the focus of our website, SciMex. But I should say there are science media centres around the world. So there's one in New Zealand, there's one in Germany, there's one in Spain, there's one in the UK, there's one in Africa, there's one in Taiwan. There's a similar organization in the US called SciLine, and there's a science media center in Canada as well. So there are, science media centers or science media center-like organizations across the world, and we're certainly hearing more wanting to start science media centers every day.
Excellent. So it's not just for Aussies. This type of organization is widespread around the world. All right. Well. I think this was extremely valuable for researchers. Is there anything else you would like to add that we haven't touched on, Lyndal?
I guess just to encourage anybody that does find themselves the target of harassment to, look after their well-being first. It really, really can be quite a difficult time. And so, really reach out to your peers, your colleagues, your friends and family to get that level of support, because it can be quite an isolating process. Anyone who's going through is also welcome to reach out to us at the Australian Science Media Centre. We're really keen to know when this is taking place and to see how we might be able to help.
Excellent. And let's remember, it's important that we scientists get out there. And this might be a price to pay, but I think it's part of our duty as researchers to get our evidence-based knowledge out, even though it has its side effects sometimes. For a minority of cases, for example, I had no issues whatsoever, even though I was talking about climate change. I had a good experience with every journalist and with the public in general. So it doesn't have to go bad, but if it goes bad and harassment happens, now you have tips and tools to deal with it. And
that's right. And it's really important to focus on the silent majority who you might never hear from, but who are probably learning a lot from you being out there and speaking to the media. So really focusing on, who might benefit from you being out and talking to a journalist is really important.
Yeah, well, what I realized when I put out videos about my own PhD research is that the world is full of nice people that will show signs of gratitude if we researchers put that little extra effort to make things more accessible to them. And I even got an email from a stranger saying, "Oh, I watched your video. I finally understand what the problem is with this thing. Thank you for doing what you're doing." And I was like, wow, That's amazing. I think nobody ever told me thank you for doing my PhD work up until that point. So it was a very rewarding experience. So let's not get the negatives overshadow the positives. Interacting with the public is by large a positive thing that will enrich your experience as a scientist.
It's a nice reminder for all of us as well. If you see something you like online, say something nice about it, because we hear a lot more negative comments online than we do positive.
Exactly. Okay, Lyndal, well, it was great to talk to you and hear all the amazing work you've been doing on this topic. Thank you for your time, and thank you all for listening. Enjoy the rest of the issue. Keep swiping, and I'll see you at the next one. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.